Welcome, Justin Sullivan, at the Keith Moon Bar of the London Astoria. 3 hours' time, New Model Army taking the stage. And you've been incredibly busy in the last couple of months. I understand that a mammoth two-man tour of America. Tell me about that.
There was 4 of us on the road, 2 of us on stage. I went with Dean White, who plays keyboards in New Model Army, but actually he's a fantastic guitar player. Right. And we did a kind of sort of semi-acoustic version of New Model Army with 2 guitars and occasionally a keyboard. And the reason for going, really more than anything else, is it's 10 years since we were in the States. And there are pockets of people all over North America that, who love New Model Army, were their favourite band. Right. And it's just out of respect to them, really, that we thought we have to go in some form or other. And it was a fantastic tour in a sense because they were so pleased that we come back. Right. And I have to say that I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the driving. We did it in a van. We did it the hard way.
You've always been a road hog, haven't you? You've written poetically about the road.
I love the road. I still think it's romantic eating rubbish food at the motorway service station at 3 o'clock in the morning. I've got something missing. Right. We drove, thousands of miles across the desert and everything. I love it. Right. And every night was a kind of reunion with these people that have kept faith with us despite the fact we haven't been there for so long.
But breaking into America 20 years ago was not easy, was it, for you? They were particularly hostile, weren't they?
Well, we had problems with America in the sense there was a time in the middle of the 80s when we tried several times for work permits and we were denied work permits. On the grounds of no artistic merit.
No artistic
merit?
No
artistic merit, they said. This is the only thing they ever said. I mean,
is anybody else in that club, to your knowledge?
I'm not sure. Lots of people said it was political, and we have no proof of that either way. So. Right. And then we did eventually get into America, but then we had a lot of problems with the kind of corporations. Mm-hmm. The way the music business is run, and every time we came with a big label who promised the earth, and then it never kind of worked out that way. And this time was just great to tour without a corporation, without any pretense of trying to break America, just to go and play to people that wanted to see us. Right. And they wanted to see us really badly.
Again,
so it was a pleasure every
there's
night.
An interesting story from those times that Capitol Records, when you got the EMI deal here, Capitol was your company in the States, and they received a band photograph and said that if you don't have a tooth job, you'll never break the States. Is it as crazy as that?
We were told that if the singer doesn't get his teeth fixed, yes, we could never become popular in the States. And of course they were right. As it turns out, they were right. So.
You reckon?
Yeah.
What were
I have said, like a lot of Europeans, I got a very sort of we have a lot of sort of love-hate relationship with America. Right. It's very different. It's an alien culture, and just because it's so familiar due to the sort of films and TV, and in theory we speak the same language, English, we think of it as familiar, and we get there and we judge it by English standards or European standards. It's not the same. It's an alien country. It's different. Yeah. And as long as you respect it as such, then it's a fascinating place to go. Right. And I have to say that this time we went, and I thought it would be a very interesting time to go with the war and the Bush administration and so on, and I certainly expected this massive kind of pro-war, pro-Bush, patriotic fervour, flags everywhere, and this kind of thing. On the contrary, very little of it. And the people we met were very anti-Bush, very anti the war. There's a lot of unease about where America's headed in the world, in America. Yes. And I think it's very important for Europeans to be reminded about that.
Right. Very conflicting attitudes out there, aren't there? After Vietnam, the Vietnam veterans were mocked and things like that.
It's split down the middle, as you can tell from the last election, when it was split between the Republican and Democrat, and the Republicans staged a kind of coup d'état, really. Right. And that great division remains.
Yeah. Do you like America?
I think it's like everywhere else. There's great things about it and not so great things about it, and I could say the same about Britain.
Right. Do you feel safe there?
I feel perfectly safe. In what sense?
Just in terms of travelling around and menacing danger or anything like that. No.
No. I mean, if I was to feel uneasy, so I've walked around all sorts of places in the world. Rio in the middle of the night, and the place I feel most scared is Leeds on closing time on Saturday night. To be honest.
Chapeltown, Leeds is.
Well, not even Chapeltown. Just anywhere in an English city at closing time on a Saturday night is more threatening than most places in the world.
Wow. Your latest album, Navigating by the Stars, Tell us about how that came about.
I'd wanted to do a solo record for some time, actually. It was partly for musical reasons. New Model Army's always been driven by rhythm section, which I really like. Drums and bass drive New Model Army.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of what we've done in the past has been soul music inspired, really, rhythm section driven.
Those are your influences, the 60s
Yeah,
soul
there's
thing.
kind of, well, it's the Northern Soul thing,
Northern
which
soul,
I kind of grew up with a bit.
Yeah.
And
70s,
yeah, 70s Northern Soul, and that's kind of what started the band. With myself and Stuart were both into punk rock and Northern Soul, and that was kind of the big influence at the beginning. And the Northern Soul thing stuck in the sense we've always made music which has got that kind of attacking, leaning forward, dance floor thing.
What kind of Northern Soul number?
But people don't really see it because they think it's a rock band. They don't see that influence.
Mm-hmm. What kind of number from that Northern Soul era is that pummeling rhythm which is
Plenty,
New Model Army?
all of it.
Really?
Yeah, really. If people look beneath the surface in New Model Army, they'll find all that soul stuff.
Right.
But it's not very obvious because it's also influenced by rock and punk and folk music and all
So
sorts.
any particular tracks from the 70s?
Well, you're going to play one. Oh, Get Ready by the Temptations will do fine.
Right.
That will do as good as any. Ghost in My House.
Right.
Any of those sort of things.
Right.
But Navigating by the Stars was an attempt to do something really different. I wanted to make an album which was not driven by rhythm section, that was kind of very big and open and beautiful, I think.
Right.
The main sort of criteria I set myself was to make an album which was without angst and which was beautiful and which wasn't about the American Empire or our own civilization or our own little lives or anything like that. It was all about things that were going to last longer than that. It's all about nature and God, which to me are the same thing anyway.
Right.
And especially songs about the ocean, because I'm in love with the ocean.
Right.
And so I sort of set out to make this big soundscape, and I worked with a guy called Ty Unwin, who's a classical film music composer, and Danny Thompson, sort of legendary double bass players, just an amazing guy as well as being an amazing musician. And then old friends Mark Felton playing harmonica, who will be here tonight, I think, for one song, which would be great.
He appeared on Poison.
Yeah, Poison Street, the ballad, and those sort of things. And then two guys out of the band, Michael and Dean, who I've worked with a lot over the last 2 years, sort of semi-acoustic way, and they're really
I know you don't like
flexible
labels.
musicians.
I know you don't like labels, but Mark's very much into the blues, and some people have liked to label you early New Model Army punk blues. Is that a kind of label that, if you were to agree to labels, you would like?
Punk blues?
Yeah, I've read that somewhere quite recently. Punk blues, Poison Street.
Well, Poison Street would fit nicely into that, I agree.
Yeah.
The thing is, our influence is so eclectic, and we try very hard never to write the same song twice, never to make the same album twice. And so we take all sorts of different influences. So a song like You Weren't There on the last album is straight hip-hop, really.
Yeah.
It's miles away from punk blues.
Yeah.
And then there's some other stuff which is kind of very folk influence somewhere. Somebody said the other day we were a cross between Killing Joke and Leonard Cohen. And I kind of like that as well, but none of them really stick.
Right,
do you know what I mean?
Right. And the last album for the band, 8, in 2000, that was the first time you were in the producer's seat, is that right?
Yeah, I think we chose to sort of not produce it, almost. The previous album, Strange Brotherhood, we'd been locked in a studio for sort of 3.5 years together.
Right.
And a lot of arguing and so on between myself and Robert, and that was towards the end of our kind of creative relationship. A lot of conflict, and a lot of money spent, sitting in studios arguing, and then a lot of thoughts about production. And we decided that what we needed to do with 8 was to write it fast, produce it fast, not worry about production, and do a kind of really simple album on 16 track. And that's how it was.
But no Strange Brotherhood, that was 3 years in the making, wasn't it?
Strange Brotherhood or 8?
Yeah. Strange Brotherhood was 3 years in the making, wasn't it?
And 8 was like 2 months.
Right. Yeah. And those 3 years, you obviously exploring the creative tension leads to good things. Listening to that album now, did that work? Were you pleased with it?
I don't think that creative tension always leads to good things, actually.
Right.
I think sometimes the songs that are really quick to write and that almost write themselves are sometimes the best songs.
Right.
But sometimes songs you labour on for years and years and years can turn out all right. I don't think there's any rules.
Right.
In fact, I'm sure there's no rules. It's like there's no rule to playing the perfect gig.
Right.
I've played 2,000-3,000 gigs or something. What's the secret to doing the perfect gig?
And when it comes to the perfect album, the holy grail of the perfect album, there cannot be no room.
Don't know.
In any sort of musical genre, what's a perfect album to you? Going back 30 years, you know.
What are my favourite albums? Are you asking me what my favourite albums are, or are you asking for a definition of a perfect album?
Yeah, a perfect album.
I have to say Quadrophenia comes close for me personally.
Wow.
I was 17 when that came out, and so that's kind of the right
Formative
age. Yeah. I also think it's a wonderful combination of completely chaotic, the complete chaos of sort of force of nature. Here we are sitting in the Keith Moon bar. Keith Moon had this kind of essence of sort of force of nature about the way he played. It was chaotic, it was random. And that gives that album a kind of wonderful random driving sense, while the rest of it is very orchestrated and very melodic. Mm-hmm. So it's this wonderful combination of sort of wild beauty to me.
Right.
Very much how I see the ocean, again, coming back to that. And I think, New Malami touched on that sort of thing from time to time. It's a romanticism, if you like. Big sound, romanticism. But again, it's not all we do. We touch on so many different, we go so many different alleys.
Right. When it came to if we can go through the start of the band in the early 80s, I mean, say in Britain, those were very divided times, weren't they? Thatcherism was just sort of gone in. New Model Army, Oliver Cromwell, you spent a long time talking about the band and the concept of the band before you went ahead?
Not at all.
No?
No.
It happened over a drink,
This is a kind of, it's a misnomer that New Model Army started as a kind of, the music was a backdrop to pushing a particular political philosophy, anti-Thatcher, so on.
Yeah.
And it was very kind of carefully planned. Quite the opposite. I met Stuart and Jules around the same period in the late 70s. And Stuart had the same kind of influences as me in music, as we said, sort of punk and northern soul. Mm-hmm. And Jules had an influence in all things sort of creative and to do with lyrics but it was just the joy of creativity, that's all it was. I sat down with Stuart, we started writing songs, and it was great. And we thought we'd play a gig in a pub in Bradford. Need a name. What a name. Thought of, I think we had a list of about 200 names we were sort of messing around with even, something like that. And we picked New Model Army. It's the nearest thing we ever had to a revolution in Britain.
Right.
Cromwell co-opted the army in the later parts of the war, and there was a military dictatorship which follows every revolution anyway in history. And people started to read an awful lot into it. We just thought it was a great name.
How about Slade the Leveller?
And Slade the Leveller was, that comes from a different source again, but it was a tradition around the early 80s and sort of punk times for everyone to have an alternative name.
An alias.
An alias. And this was less to do with sort of the pretension of having an artistic alias as the fact we were all on the dole at the time. So we all were signing on every week, and we couldn't use our real names because we'd appear in the local paper as so-and-so, and then they'd stop your dole. So everybody had an alias, and that was mine.
Right, as simple as that. So going back to Bradford, and there's one track in particular I was delighted to listen to again, which was BD7. And that's the postcode. It's got to be the postcode, yeah.
Pick a really obscure track you have. BD7, yeah.
Yeah, just about the sort of the Bradford scene, because it's the lyrics relate to that fabulous graffiti that used to be up at the top of Great Horton. It's a mean old scene.
It's a mean old scene. I believe it was put there in about 1968, 69.
That's
actually,
right.
Before I lived in Bradford.
Yeah, and it stayed for a good 10 years.
Yeah, it's much longer. I think it finally came down
in the 80s, I think. Yeah.
Mid-90s, actually.
Was it?
I think, yeah.
As late as that, right. But that is writing about, that is a kind of bluesy theme. It's writing about the place, the time, as it is at that time. How did Bradford strike you when you went up to study there? How did it strike you as a place, coming from the south?
I loved it to start with. Even though I remember the first month I was there, it rained every day.
You're joking.
There was something about, I think if you come from, I come from, if you drew a triangle between Watford, Wickham and Slough, I come from the middle of there, which is now commuter belt for London. When I was a kid, it was kind of still kind of country.
Right.
but now it's commuter belt. But it's very cosy. It's kind of small hills, Chiltern Hills. It's a moderately wealthy area and very wealthy now, and very cosy. And what I liked about Yorkshire, coming from that, it was the opposite. It was the big open landscape.
Right.
And even Bradford's a city, but because of the hills, you have this sense of big space around you. Mm-hmm. And the stone is beautiful as compared to all the kind of brick cities like Leeds or Manchester or most of the places down south.
Yeah.
So I loved it.
Right, right.
And I've been there God knows how many years since, 27, 28 years or something.
But around 1980, again, I'm sort of harping on the Thatcher theme, but you know, Bradford was really one of the poorest places in England. I think the Homewood estate had the highest unemployment in the whole of England at one point in the late sort of 70s. Did that kind of vibe strike you, that there was a lot of poverty around, or?
Yeah, but I was a sort of political animal from the age of 12, even back in comfortable southeast England.
Right.
And it's, obviously struck me. And Bradford's still, like now in the media, you see Bradford is kind of, I saw a thing 2 years ago in the summer, it was the year after the set of riots in Manningham, it said, "Riot City at boiling point." And it's worth remembering that these riots that took place 3 years ago, whatever it was, 3 years ago, were very contained. It's a small area of the city. At the same time, and I live up in Thornbury, which is kind of mixed area, all sorts of different sort of nationalities and religions. And there was in my street, exactly the same time that was going on, there was a multiracial cricket match going on. You know what I mean? Just people playing in the street, all different families, you know.
So it was totally hyped by the press?
Yeah. And then we were on tour at the time. We came back, and the whole city was crawling with film crews. Going, filming scenes about this riot-torn city, races tearing each other apart.
Right.
And you would think that it's a city on permanent boiling point between racial tension, and it's not.
It's quite the reverse.
There are tensions, of course. There are tensions in every English city. It's a very claustrophobic island with a dubious history and a very dubious politics. And Bradford's not an easy place, and it still has terrible things about it, but it's not a city which is continually sort of tearing itself apart, I don't think.
And the other thing about that BD7 track that struck me was it was pure early 70s Stones. So are you a Stones
There was definitely R&B in there, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a guitar riff, which is kind of very vaguely Stonesy like, yeah.
Keith Richards is one of the people that you...
Someone asked me if my favourite guitar players the other day. Keith Richards is definitely in there.
Really?
Tom Verlaine is another one.
Right.
And currently definitely Josh Homme out of Queens of the Stone Age, who's a good friend and a brilliant guitar player.
Right. When you brought out the first album, Vengeance, you were absolutely, in certain quarters, that sort of isolated you from...
Completely. We thought of ourselves as a left-wing band supporting a whole set of causes, but the moment we wrote the song Vengeance, we were ostracised from all sorts of things. I remember in the middle of the 80s, there was a series of Greenpeace benefits in London, and we said, we're worth 1,500 people in London, we'll do it. We're up to supporting this. And the word came back that we were considered unsuitable to play their benefit, which hurt, actually, a great deal. Right. Vengeance was just written off the moment.
Did they substantiate that? Did they say
no, but it was all to do with, we couldn't be relied upon to say the right thing. And this comes back to something we touched on earlier, that the idea, New Model Army was never a backdrop for a political philosophy. We've written about lots and lots of different things, personal songs, story songs about other people. There's a bit of politics and social commentary in there, because that's part of life and it's interesting. But it's not the reason, not our raison d'etre.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of contradictions within what we've written lyrically, because emotions are contradictory. And everything we've done is from an emotional point of view. Vengeance is not a political philosophy, it's emotional.
Right.
51st State is not a piece of political philosophy, it's an emotional gut reaction.
Right.
And people kind of sort of get muddled up about that. But to me, music's always about emotions, it's not about philosophy.
But you were wanting to be, especially in the early days, seen as a political band, or you felt like a political band. You know, if you were approaching people like Greenpeace, politics was part of your platform. Red Wedge, was that something that's?
Well, Red Wedge again didn't ask us. This is an interesting thing. We kind of went, we're here, and everybody went, oh no. We've always been.
Why do you think that was? Red Wedge was pretty radical.
For the same reason, that we couldn't be relied upon to say the right things. I remember Jules was invited to take part in the Red Wedge event at Bradford, and very much the same thing. You know, as artists, we refuse to be. We refuse to say the right things always. You've got to go for what you consider the truth at any given time. And I remember there was this very corrupt Labour council at the time in Bradford, and Jules had a go at them about the fucking drains in Byerley Estate, and the fact that these things were never fixed, and everybody's going, oh my God, you can't say this. You know, it's meant to be Labour supporting, and
not on message.
Not on message, and I think it's death for artists to be on message.
Yeah.
We never considered ourselves prepared to be guaranteed to be on message, and therefore we were considered dangerous.
Yeah. No Rest for the Wicked, lots of success there. It was around that time that Stuart left. Is that right? Yeah. Can you tell us some of the background to that? Because that's, you know, when one of the founder members leaves, that's it's a sign of the times, isn't it? No?
Yeah, there's not much I can say about it other than it broke my heart at the time. I was very sad. He was an unbelievably talented musician with sort of strange God-given talent, a bit like sort of, you know, God waking up one morning and going, you, born on Buttershore Estate, you know, with nothing, no great sort of musical history in the family or anything.
Yeah.
Unbelievable talent. And there were lots of reasons he left, but you have to ask him really rather than me.
Right.
You know, as I said, it broke my heart at the time. I didn't want him to leave. He left.
And there were rumours around that time that the band might split.
Yeah, but there have been rumours like that for 23 years, to be honest.
Right. Now, at one point, the band nearly had to split because you were 92. You suffered a bad shock on stage, didn't you? You were nearly electrocuted.
Yeah,
was that a creative experience in retrospect?
I have to say that dying, or the process of dying, is something I'd do every week if I could get away with it. I picked up a stage light in the last encore of some gig in Switzerland. I was going to shine it on the audience, it wasn't on. And then the lighting engineer saw that, wanted to switch it on, he'd turn it on. And I remember my hand gripped on this light because I picked up inside. And I remember the current coming up my left hand in a split second. I remembered having time to think, mistake. And that was it. And then I was on my back with this light going like that. And I was on the current for about 12 seconds because everyone thought it was part of the gig because I'm lying on my back with this light going like that. And then
were you in any way conscious, or that
no, I was gone.
And
then I was gone for another 3 minutes, and they carried me down to the dressing room, and I came back around with this Swiss guy trying to kickstart my heart. So I was lying astride, sort of trying to kick, and my heart came round. And during that time, I had the things that everybody talks about, which is the floating feeling, the white light, the warmth, something I can describe only as perfect peace. Right. Really, like really. You could take the best drug experience that anyone's ever had, multiply it by 1,000,000 times. You're not even close to how good that feels. What happens after that bit? I'm sure that's the process of dying. Yeah. After the heart stops. What happens after that? Of course, I have no idea.
So, in a certain way, coming round to lots of anxious faces in the dressing room was the nightmare. that was the real shock.
Yeah, I didn't want to come back. I remember coming back and everybody screaming in my ear.
Right. Yeah.
And I didn't particularly want to come back. No, not at all.
Again, another sort of crucial partnership you talked about, Stuart, is Rob Heaton. Now, that must have been also very painful for that to sort of, why did that come to?
I think it was different with Robert. If I look back on my time with Robert, we had a kind of, Robert joined about in 82, and I had a kind of very special relationship with Stuart, and Robert was kind of outside of that. But when Stuart left, Robert came to the fore as a kind of co-writer, and I found it quite, I found working with Robert very easy, and we had a kind of golden period towards the end of the 80s, starting with Jules' album Hex, and then through Thunder and Constellation and so on, when everything we did together seemed to work.
Right.
But I'm not sure we were ever kind of really close in the way that was with Stuart. But we did have a very good working relationship. And then from the beginning of the 90s onwards, we started to want to do different things.
Right.
And it got more and more difficult to make records together.
Right.
Culminating in the Strange Brotherhoods of Marathon, where we were in the studio, we basically wanted to do different things. I wanted to do.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that often happens with creative partnerships and so on.
They run their course.
And it ran its course, and it had run its course, and we'd actually basically agreed that it was time to stop. The other thing was that I love touring. I really love touring. I love everything about touring. I love hotel rooms. I don't even mind airports. And he didn't like touring.
Right.
He didn't like the hours of hanging around and so on. And so it was obviously time to go our separate ways, and we'd agreed that. And then he got ill, which meant that we went our separate ways slightly earlier.
Right. But on a positive, around that time, a bit later, what is really your current sort of creative partnership, as I see it, is David Blomberg, and you've done a guitar together.
I did a close thing with Dave Blomberg in 93, 94, where we went on tour together and did an album together. But actually Dave lives in Devon, and I don't see an awful lot of Dave. My central creative relationship now is with Michael, who took Robert's place.
I see, right.
As drummer. And also with Dean, who's a kind of amazingly flexible musician who lives in Leeds. And the three of us, because we live close together, we spend a lot of time together. And we've been on tour together a lot in the last 2 or 3 years, doing kind of semi-acoustic version of New Model Army. And they're both very flexible musicians.
Right.
And Michael is very kind of he's a really sort of positive guy. And he's up for everything, and he's very passionate, and he's a very kind of soulful, passionate musician.
Right.
And I really admire. I worked with Robert for a long time. He's a great drummer. I admire drummers because it's something I cannot do. And I love drummers that play with sort of passion and soul. And Michael's really like that.
And you're saying you three hook up in Leeds.
We see a lot of each other.
There are rumours of a new album in the making?
There will be a new album, yeah.
Right.
It's more difficult with Nelson and Dave. Nelson lives in Colchester. He did live in Bradford for a while, but now lives back in Colchester, which is his hometown. He's involved in a number of projects down there, which makes constant contact difficult. Is that we tend to sort of get together at certain times, and then he goes back to doing what he does. But he's a wonderfully able musician again.
Right. So the new album could be out?
New album will come sometime next year. I'm not saying when, but...
All right. Slade the Leveller, Justin, Sullivan, have a great gig tonight.
Thanks.
And thanks very much for your time. It's been a pleasure meeting you.
Cheers.